Hello. All right. So Michelle McFarland here, the most referred realtor in Quinte. I'm here with Sandra Brown from Mortgage Alliance, and we are here to talk to you about some key dates in an agreement of purchase and sale.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Brown. I'm your mortgage broker with Mortgage Alliance's Ontario approval team. And I'm here because people ask these questions all the time. They don't know, because Michelle and I do this every single day. We know what everything means, but we're going to make it so it's easier for everybody else to understand exactly what they have to be aware of. And
Yes.
dates are really important for us, right, Michelle? On your
Yes.
side, go ahead.
Yep. A lot of the time too, we as professionals in our field forget that we know what the terminology means. So when we're talking to our client and we mention the irrevocable date, sometimes our clients look at us like deer in headlights because they have no idea what we're talking about. So we just thought that we would educate you on a couple specific dates to see if it helps you understand specific dates.
And also terminology is confusing because what one realtor might call it and another one might call it, and me as a mortgage person might call that same date. It all means the same thing, but we have a different reason for the same date.
Yes.
Right.
So when we put together an offer as realtors, we have to give an irrevocable date. So our buyer is presenting an offer to a seller, and we have to give them a deadline, which is also called an irrevocable date and time for that offer to be accepted or declined. So for me, that's called an irrevocable date. Sandra, do you have another word or anything for that?
So irrevocable also means that if they don't sign it or nothing gets finished beyond that point, the contract is dead. Because whether people realize it or not, a purchase and sale agreement is actually a contract that you're making out.
It's a very legal and binding contract.
Exactly. So it's not something you're doing just for the fun of putting in offers. You're doing it because you really want that house.
Yeah. So that irrevocable date is the day and the time that you would prefer to have an answer by.
Okay. And then the next most important date, like I think this is the most important date of all the dates, is called the completion date.
Right, which is to me the closing date. That's what I usually use it as, which in a client's perspective, it's the day that you get your keys. It's the day you take possession of your new home.
And that's the day you get to go get into your house. You can sit on your couch. You can buy your car then.
But yeah, after that.
You know what? That is the happiest day of your life. You're going to be sitting down and it's very comfortable. And we always, like Michelle will use the word completion date, or we'll see that on a contract. But I'm going to say to you, so when do you own your house? When do you get the keys to your house? Because that's how you're going to most likely understand what that exactly means.
Now,
also,
just as a side note too, sorry, Sandra, but just as a side note, and I was thinking about this on my way to work this morning, was when we were talking about closing date, to key point that don't expect to get your keys before noon. Don't even expect to get your keys by 3 o'clock. Expect your keys between 5 and 6 o'clock. And then anything before that's just a pleasant surprise.
Actually, Michelle, you just went through this because you just bought a house.
Yes.
So when did you get the keys for your house on your completion date?
Yeah, I think we had 4 minutes to spare or 6 minutes to spare before 5 o'clock, which was when the lawyers were like, yep, it'll have to happen tomorrow, which I will mention too, as a realtor myself and been through this several times with clients, a completion date should always be, in my own opinion, on a Thursday. If it's going to be at the end of the week, it should be Thursday, never Friday, because if you ever come up with some issues with the timing and Friday hits and 5 o'clock hits and you don't have your keys, unfortunately, you're going to be waiting now until Monday. So it's really, really important to me that you don't have to stress and wait 3 extra days, or 2 extra days. So I would prefer a Thursday close. Monday to Thursday is essentially the sweet spot.
And that's a good point that you're making there, because there's so many things that we cannot control. And just to clarify more about what a completion date means, that's the date your mortgage goes gets funded, which means your lender's paying out the seller so that you can take possession of your house.
Right. Right.
You don't
And
get the mortgage before that. You have to, it waits for that completion date.
yeah,
That's important.
And on closing date too, if you are selling a home and you're purchasing a new home, if you have proceeds from the sale of your home, that's the date that those funds should also be in your account as well by the end of that day. So if you sold a house and have $50,000 profit in addition to purchasing your new home, that's the day that those funds should be going into your account as well.
And again, that brings up another very good point. If you're selling a house and you're buying another house, what is it you got to do to protect? Because you want to make sure that either you're matching up those two dates, that you're closing on your house, the sale of your house one day, or the same day as the day you're buying your house. Because otherwise, what do? Because you need the money from that sale to buy the next house.
Right, which would then bridge financing obviously is what comes into play at that point, right?
And we can talk about bridge financing in the future because there is some strict guidelines regarding bridge financing. One being a firm sale of a house.
Right.
Right. So that's important. But let's stay on topic. We'll stay on the whole dates.
Right.
What's your next most favorite date?
Closing date is always my favorite date, of course, but conditional date is also super important because that's the date that obviously when you're purchasing a home with conditions such as financing, inspection, insurance, what have you, that's the date in which everything needs to be completed by in order for it to be a valid and accepted offer.
And keep in mind that is the most stressful period of this buying process. I have to say, because you're terrified that you're not going to get the mortgage, you're not going to get this is going to fall apart, the home inspection is going to be terrible. All the worst scenarios go around in your head, but with the right professional, it should go fairly smooth. And that's why we don't want to wait until the last minute to get all this stuff together. Let's start before you actually put an offer on a house so that you can get all this stuff together. So on that 5 days or sometimes it's 3 days or 1 day where you have conditions of finance because you're trying to beat somebody out. You just don't need that extra stress of needing to give 500 pieces of paperwork to your lender.
Oh yes, and from personally just going through this, less than a month ago, I know that when we accepted the offer on our property, they had 3 days for the condition of finance, and literally the last hour of their condition due date, I was just like stressing because I was like, why don't they have an answer from the bank? They should already have an answer from the bank. It's like 3 minutes to 5 o'clock. What is going on? So
they don't have your mortgage broker. That's why, Michelle.
That's right. And I don't even know what bank that they were using, but honestly, it was very, very stressful. So it certainly makes a big difference to know that the professionals that are all involved in your transaction are all on the same page. They are all aware of dates, and hopefully they try to exceed your expectations and get these answers before the last minute.
Yeah. And again, of course, you bought right before Christmas, like the craziest time of year, and you did it, and you got moved and everything was smooth, and that's good. But you didn't have a moving truck the day. That's the other thing we tell people: don't get a moving truck the day you close. That means the day you get the keys. Don't bother, because like you said, Michelle, 4 minutes before 5 o'clock is whenever you got the keys. So
and you're paying a mover, you're paying a mover by the hour. So if they're at your house at noon and you don't get the keys till 5, you've just spent hundreds and maybe thousands of dollars waiting.
Exactly. So the conditions of finance is important, but usually it's not just conditions of finance. That date includes your financing, your home inspections, if you need appraisals or whatever it is you need to fulfill whatever conditions you're putting into that offer. Correct, Michelle?
Right. Yes. Now, I think something important to you, Sandra, is the acceptance date.
Exactly. So the reason why it's important to us is to know how long we have for your conditions of finance, because just because you made the offer on, say, the 1st of January, doesn't mean that the seller has accepted the offer the 1st of January. Sometimes it's 3 days, like you don't know. Right. And conditions of finance date starts from the date that they accept that offer.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So then there's one other date that's usually in the agreement of purchase and sale that most people don't really pay much attention to. It's more so for the lawyers than anything, which is the title search date. And this date is just specifically really for the lawyers to search the title of the home prior to you taking possession of that, just to make sure that there's no liens against the property and so on. That date is generally 2 weeks before your closing date.
So let me follow up on that one. So that is actually a very, very important date because all mortgages are tied to that title, right?
Right.
So a standard mortgage clause is you have to have title insurance. But if the title has not been clear because they've done their searches, but it's not done yet, you can't get title insurance.
Right.
And I've had situations where the lawyer goes for the title insurance and found out that there's an issue with the title. It could have been a typo error or something like that. And it took a month and a half for them to get that resolved.
Oh, wow.
So now, yes. So now your closing date that should have been on Thursday or Friday is a month and a half later.
Actually, I have a situation. So in 6 years, I'm in my 7th year now, but in 6 years, I never had a deal not come together, not close. And just before the end of this 2020, I did have a situation where the deal did not close, and it was a title issue. And so that was my very first experience with there being an issue with title, and they said that it was going to be like 3 months before it got resolved. So unfortunately, my buyer just wasn't interested in waiting that long. So we had to walk away. But that was the first experience I ever had with something not actually coming together.
Yeah, it's scary because you've already got everything planned, you've got everything changed over, everything. But at this point, the last you want is that to happen. But there's nothing that can fix. All you can do is hope your lawyer is on it and is checking it way before the day. I have had some lawyers where they check on the day of closing, and it just doesn't make sense to do that.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's too close for comfort.
Too close for comfort. And all these dates that we talk about are important dates because sometimes Michelle's going to ask them, well, when do you want your conditions of finance? How are you going to know? Mm-hmm. Right? And sometimes having that good communication with your mortgage person, it gives you a chance to know exactly how to answer that question. So when Michelle says, what's your conditions of finance? Well, I know it's going to take my mortgage person 5 days or 3 days or 24 hours, like some of my clients. But at least you can plan for that. So when you're making that offer, it's a stronger offer because you know exactly what you're getting into.
Right. And usually I would make an effort to connect or communicate with the mortgage professional that they're using. Hopefully it's you. But I generally try and communicate with them before we even write the offer, just to say, like, can you be clear in saying, like, do you need 5 days? Do you need 7 days? And when we're talking days, we're talking about business days. So generally speaking, it does not include Saturdays and Sundays.
Well, I'm glad you said that because not all realtors think that way. I sometimes get 5 days, but 5 days is on a Friday and Monday's a holiday. So that's 3 days that we can't do anything anyways because nobody's
right.
looking at that.
That's super, super important to make sure that is in your conditional clause is saying business days or banking days, specified that, because otherwise it could be a situation where it's just days and it's on a holiday or something where it's a useless day to you.
And that's a very valid point. Whenever you're making an offer, work with your realtor, work with Michelle and say, hey, okay, so here's this date, here's where I like to take possession, and make sure the dates are going to make sense. Because if it lands on a Friday and you run into a problem and it's a long weekend, you now have 4 days, so you've got to wait.
Right.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean that Monday is going to be worked perfect because you still have to go through the process of getting it resolved. And all those industries have been closed down. The lawyers have worked on the weekend.
Exactly. I think mortgage brokers and realtors are really the only people who do work on weekends when it comes to a real estate transaction. Lawyers do not work weekends, from what I understand anyways. Banks obviously are not reachable for the most part. So, I mean, it's really, really important to make sure you're using the professionals who can work kind of around the clock for you.
Just answering your questions does not necessarily mean you're buying that house right away. It's knowing that Michelle is there to answer your questions, whether it just to ease your conscience or ease your concerns. It is that simple. We can answer questions in 5 minutes. Just pick up the phone and call us.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps up the dates. If you guys ever have questions, or if you want to comment below with another date that you may have a question about, or if maybe it's just another terminology used for one of these dates that mean the same thing, reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, that's the great point. And that's what we're always here for, is to help answer questions and try to get you to the point where you're comfortable doing. This is one of the biggest transactions of your life. You have to be comfortable doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So reach out to us. All of our information, we will post our website links below in the comments so that you guys can check us out if you do not have a personal relationship with us yet. But otherwise, we'll be back in the next couple of weeks, I think, to try to put some other stuff.
And if there's anything else that you want to know about and you just don't know, you can ask us. We won't post your name anywhere, but we will answer your question online just for you.
All right, Sandra. Well, it was great chatting, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yes. Have a great day.